Mayor, and thank you to Alex for doing this talk today.
Pleasure.
This is a period where resilience seems to be the #1 word. It has been in Israel for many years, but now it's become a global concept, and you'll hear more about that from JNF as the year goes on, the concept of resilience and what we're doing in Israel to help build resilience. But in the meantime, I just want to thank you all for hopping in. And again, thank you, Alex and Sheila and everybody and Gabby and the whole team for all the, JNF has pivoted to a virtual existence like everybody else. And I must say the team has done a tremendous job in responding so quickly and generating all these various forums and webinars, etc. So thank you, everybody. And hope you enjoy this morning's session.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. Thank you. Right, can you all hear me now? Can you hear me? Yes? Okay. We're very, very fortunate to welcome today a friend of ours, Alex Rifkin. Alex, welcome.
Thank you.
You did speak to our seniors group some time back, but it's always wonderful to hear you speak again. And thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
For those of you who don't know, Alex is a lawyer, an author, a speaker, specializing on the Arab-Israeli conflict. And he's just written a new book. So we're very, very keen to hear all about it, called Zionism, the Concise History. So, Alex, thank you for joining us. Welcome. And let's hear from you now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sheila, for that introduction. And first of all, I want to thank Gabby and Dan and Romy and the entire team at JNF. JNF is really an organization that's very close to my heart, and I've had the great pleasure of speaking at JNF events in Australia and America and elsewhere over many years. And JNF really is the organization that most epitomizes what Israel is. It's about the collective efforts and enterprise of the Jewish people to create something. And this is the organization that is absolutely central. It is absolutely central to the survival of the state and the relationship between Israel and the diaspora. Gabby, could you just mute the others if you don't mind? Oh, thank you. So when I produced my first book, which I was also very pleased to speak about at this club back in 2017, I was determined to expose the assault on it, and it's being held up there, lovely, thank you very much. I was determined to expose the assault on Israel for the sake of truth and for the welfare of the Jewish people. I wanted to inspire new advocates and activists, and I wanted to equip the reading public with the facts and knowledge they need to understand what this conflict is really about. But more than that, I was compelled by my upbringing as a Soviet Jew, with an acute awareness of the daily cruelties and injustices to which our people were subject, and to now use my position as a citizen of a free country to stand up and to hit back. This new book is very much a continuation of that mission, but it also came in response to a very specific problem. It had become apparent to me, as no doubt it is to all of you, that the word Zionist has been stripped of its true meaning and has instead become a word of curse and infamy. Somehow the movement that sought to liberate or at least shelter the Jewish people from anti-Semitism, which has seen us hounded and humiliated and burned in every generation, somehow the movement that sought to give the Jews a scrap of land to call their own so that they and their contributions to humanity shall not vanish from this earth, somehow this has become akin to racism, to Nazism, to colonialism, to white supremacism, and every other popular conception of evil known today. These are lies that cannot be allowed to be laundered into truth, because the consequence of allowing this deliberate distortion of Zionism to take place is that new generations will only ever know of Zionism and Zionists as an evil to be fought. And when Zionism is the foundational movement of the Jewish state, when it is the national movement of the Jewish people, this will be a fight that will ensnare Jews of the left and of the right, religious and secular, in Israel and the diaspora without distinction, like every assault on the Jewish people before it. So this is why I felt that a book explaining Zionism, the leaders that defined it, the events that shaped it, and the present challenges to it, both internal and external, was so badly needed. And in writing this book, I initially planned to present it as a direct rebuttal of the most pervasive and damaging accusations leveled against Zionists today. For example, that Zionism is a form of racism, a lie declared to be truth by the General Assembly of the United Nations on the 10th of November, 1975. Or that Zionists were actually in league with the Nazis, a claim outrageously popularized by the former mayor of London, Ken Livingstone, a few years ago, to the extent that Hitler plus Zionist was a top Google search in the UK for a time. Or the claim made by one of the founders of the Women's March in the United States that Zionism is incompatible with feminism. And while the book addresses all of this, it seemed to me that the best way to demystify Zionism, the best way to reclaim Zionism, and the best way to debunk the slander deliberately and strategically leveled against it was not to act as the public defender of Zionism against its accusers, but to simply tell the story of Zionism in a manner that is sincere, truthful, and clear, aimed at an audience of those willing to listen. And I'm confident that everyone who reads this book will come away with a better understanding of what Zionism is, what it isn't, why it's inextricably linked to every phase of Jewish history, and therefore forms a fundamental part of Jewish identity. So how do we correctly understand Zionism? We can define it simply as the support for the right of the Jewish people to exercise national self-determination in some part of their ancestral homeland. And it emerged in the late 19th century with the aim of ingathering some of the Jews who'd been scattered throughout the world into a single national polity through which they could freely determine their own political status and safeguard and enlarge the things that make the Jewish people distinct: their languages, their culture, their history, their heritage, their traditions, their religion. But if we really want to understand Zionism, we have to understand the concepts that are at its core. And the first such concept is the idea of Jewish peoplehood. And by this I mean that the Jews, aside from being linked by our monotheistic faith and the texts and traditions that come from it, also form a distinct ethnic group, a national group. We are a people. And we attained this condition of peoplehood by virtue of originating in a single place, a place where we developed the Hebrew language, a place where we developed national traditions based on glorious battles and deep tragedies, a place where we developed our poetry and literature, and a place where we developed our gift to the world, our greatest gift to the world, the ethics derived from the Jewish religion. And so the second concept that is absolutely central to understanding Zionism is the idea of connection to land. Now, this is not something unique to the Jewish people. Peoples around the world, including our own indigenous Australians, feel deep emotional and spiritual ties to the lands to which they are indigenous, the lands in which they became a people. And for the Jewish people, that land has always been what we have known as Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, what later became Palestine, and what is again now known as Israel. And those who have attempted to thwart Zionism, to eradicate any autonomous Jewish presence from the Middle East, have also understood the importance of this connection, which is precisely why they've sought to erase it. We have seen in contemporary times campaigns led by the Palestinians in international forums aimed at denying the Jewish connection to Hebron and Jerusalem, to Jewish holy sites like the Cave of the Patriarchs and the Western Wall. We've seen top Palestinian officials claim that the existence of two Jewish temples in Jerusalem was a myth. And this happened in ancient times as well. When the Emperor Hadrian put down the final Jewish rebellion in the year 135 CE, he not only slaughtered hundreds of thousands, scattering many more throughout the vast lands of the Roman Empire, hoping they would soon forget their native lands. He also prohibited entry of Jews into Jerusalem on pain of death. He renamed Jerusalem Alea Capitolina. He erected a pagan temple on the ruins of the Jewish temple. And he renamed Judea Syria Palestina, believing that by scattering the people, by destroying the holy sites, by even renaming their land, he could break the bonds of peoplehood and nationhood, and the Jews would simply vanish among the peoples where they had come to live. But the Jews would never forget Zion. Now no longer something to be possessed and touched, it came instead to animate their dreams and visions and inhabit their entire worldly consciousness. So if we understand that the Jews are a people, a nation with national rights, with a deep connection to their indigenous lands, we begin to understand Zionism as an organic expression of this. There's so much to talk about in the story of Zionism, but today I want to focus on three aspects of it. Firstly, the justness of Zionism. Secondly, its necessity. And thirdly, its capacity to inspire. So firstly, to the justness of Zionism. When the first Zionist Congress was convened in Basel, Switzerland in 1897, it resulted in a manifesto, a document drafted by Jewish leaders from around the world, which expressed in clear and concise terms exactly what the Zionist movement stood for and what it sought to achieve. And that was to establish a national home for the Jewish people in the land of Israel, secured under public law. It would not be through war, it would not be through the displacement of others, it would be through the law. And for a people who had lived for nearly 2,000 years, subject to the whims and fancies of those who ruled over them, whose inferior status had often been enshrined in law, only by achieving international legal recognition of their human and national rights could the Jews hope to achieve their equality. And the first major international recognition of the legitimacy of Zionism came, of course, in the form of the Balfour Declaration, issued by the British on the 2nd of November, 1917, though this was in fact preceded by an earlier statement of support by the French Foreign Minister in June of that year, and there was a subsequent statement of support for Zionism by Woodrow Wilson, issued in 1918. And the Balfour Declaration came at a time when the British and their allies were liberating the former colonies of the Ottoman Empire, and it pledged British support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in the land that Hadrian had renamed Palestine. And it would later become a point of debate as to whether the Balfour Declaration was itself a legal promise, but this really passed into the realm of academic interest only, as in subsequent years, the precise wording and terms of the Balfour Declaration was incorporated into a series of treaties and other international agreements, which without a doubt had binding legal effect. So first you have the Covenant of the League of Nations, which established a mandatory system under which the great powers, the victorious allies of World War I, would act as custodians or mandatories of the liberated colonies of the Ottoman Empire until such time as their native peoples could stand on their own. And this was one of the requirements of Woodrow Wilson's 14 points, which demanded the decolonization and autonomous development of the former colonies until such time as the native peoples could take possession of the land for themselves. Then you have at San Remo in April 1920, Britain is appointed custodian or mandatory of Palestine with the express obligation to help bringing about a Jewish national home in the land. You then have the treaties of Sèvres and Lausanne signed with the vanquished Turks, which again incorporated the wording of the Balfour Declaration. So when the League of Nations formally adopted the mandate for Palestine in 1922, this had the effect, in the words of Chaim Weizmann, of converting the earlier promises from a policy position to an international legal obligation recognized by the international community as a whole. When Israel declared independence on the 14th of May 1948, pursuant to the United Nations General Assembly Plan of Partition in November of the previous year, this was the last step in a long and comprehensive legal process, which, as Alan Dershowitz writes in the introduction to my book, gave Israel the most legitimate birth certificate of any modern democracy. As Winston Churchill said, it is manifestly right and fair that the Jews scattered throughout the world should have a national home and a center where some of them may be reunited. And where else can that be but in the land with which for more than 3,000 years they've been intimately and profoundly associated. The necessity of Zionism has been proven and continues to be proven before our eyes. In fact, it's difficult to think of another political concept that has been proven as definitively as the idea that the Jews require a national home to secure their existence. Long before the Nazi period, the Roman Empire, the church, nationalist figures like Bogdan Khmelnytsky, cultural titans like Martin Luther had imprinted on the collective psyche a characterization of the Jew that made the Holocaust possible, even inevitable. Luther had called the Jews thirsty bloodhounds and murderers of all Christendom. They poisoned water and wells, stole children, and tore and hacked them apart. In 1895, decades before the world had even heard of Hitler, the Speaker of the German Parliament called the Jews cholera germs. And what is to be done with such a thing but to destroy it? As the historian Yehuda Bauer said, one does not argue with parasites. Israel was not created because of the Holocaust. Israel is not a burden dropped on the heads of the Arabs to atone for European guilt. The legitimacy of Zionism had been established long before the war period, as I've discussed. But the Holocaust, which saw the army of a sophisticated nation traverse the European continent with the mission of extinguishing every last Jewish life, aided by collaborationist regimes and governments and police forces and populations in virtually every place it entered, did have a profound effect on the course of Zionism. It served to prove without question that a national home for the Jewish people was not only a legal right, it was an existential necessity. And one need only ask the Tibetans, the Uyghurs, the Assyrians, the Yazidis, the Kurds, the persecuted and abandoned peoples of the world today, what it means to be stateless in an international system dominated by self-interest, sloth, and parsimony. Finally, to the wonder of Zionism and its capacity to inspire. The story of Zionism is the story of an ancient people who by all rational reckoning should have ceased to exist as a distinct people centuries ago. And yet somehow through nearly 2 millennia of exile, of inquisitions, of pogroms and infernos, this people survived, retained their distinct sense of peoplehood and nationhood, formed a national movement that was compelling and coherent, and achieved the physical return of that people to their ancient lands from which they'd been exiled, and the reformation of their national home. This is a story without precedent and without successor. And then when we delve deeper into the story of Zionism, its leaders, its defining moments, we see all the more how wondrous and incredible the story is. Take, for example, the Dreyfus Affair. You have a French army officer arrested, tried, wrongly convicted, and imprisoned on a distant island prison for passing military secrets to the Germans. Now, this happens not because he's guilty, but because, as the chief investigator tells the French foreign minister, his Jewish race has made him suspect for a long time. And all the while, the real traitor, a petty swindler and gambler by the name of Ferdinand Esterhazy, goes free. Now, this story of miscarriage of justice, of race and inequality captivated France. But how could the plight of one wretched army officer impact on the fate of the Jewish people? Because observing the public degradation of Dreyfus and the mob of Frenchmen outside the courtroom chanting "Death to Dreyfus and death to the Jews" was the 34-year-old Paris correspondent of a Viennese newspaper who'd been sent to report on the trial. And he'd been contemplating for a long time how to alleviate the suffering of the Jewish people. And in the Dreyfus trial, he witnessed a matinee performance of the very ideas and theories he'd been tinkering with, which served to rudely dislodge his previous view that by being good, loyal citizens, something which Dreyfus exemplified, the Jews of Europe would be safe. That man was, of course, Theodor Herzl, the founding father of modern Zionism. And within 6 months of the Dreyfus trial, he would pen the first draft of the seminal text of Zionism, the Jewish state. And within a few years, he would convene the first Zionist Congress in Basel, an event so significant that Herzl would later reflect, "At Basel, I founded the Jewish state." Another Jewish writer, Israel Zangwill, also reflected on that momentous gathering and wrote, "By the river Babylon, we sat down and there we wept, for we remembered Zion. And by the river Basel, we sat down and we resolved to weep no more." And then you have the British Navy, in urgent need of the chemical compound acetone to mix with gunpowder to reduce the smoke given off by the heavy guns so as not to reveal their positions to the Germans in their naval battles in World War I. And I hear you all wondering, what the hell does that have to do with the story of Zionism and the Jewish people? Because the man who discovered the formula for the mass production of acetone, all while experimenting into something totally different, was a Russian Jew. A lecturer in organic chemistry at the University of Manchester, he had attended the Second Zionist Congress in Basel. He'd been mesmerized by Herzl and became devoted to the Zionist cause. And that man was, of course, the first president of the State of Israel, Chaim Weizmann. And through his work with acetone, Weizmann would come into the contact of Winston Churchill, who was then First Lord of the Admiralty. And he would meet David Lloyd George, who was then Minister for Munitions, and would become Prime Minister. And he would meet a chap by the name of Balfour, the Foreign Secretary, who would later say of his conversations with Weizmann about Zionism in this period, "It is a great cause and I understand it." David Lloyd George would later reflect in his war memoirs that his conversations with Weizmann at this period were the fount and origin of the Balfour Declaration. And then you have the Ottoman authorities in Palestine expelling 18,000 Jews in 1914. And this would somehow end up materially aiding the cause of Zionism. Why? Because of those 18,000 exiled Jews, 14,000 would end up in the Egyptian port city of Alexandria, where by chance, the British and the Australian troops and their allies would soon arrive by convoy via the Suez Canal, bound for the battlefields of Turkey. And there, two of the exiled Jews, Zev Jabotinsky and Joseph Trumpeldor, would impress upon the British the benefits of forming the first regular Jewish fighting force since the Jewish rebellion against Hadrian in 135 CE. And that outfit, known as the Zion Mule Corps, would be placed under the command of a British officer by the name of John Henry Patterson, and would fight alongside our Anzacs in some of the bloodiest battles of the war. Now, Patterson would himself become a key ally in the cause of Zionism, because he would, through his contact with these vigorous and patriotic Jews, would see the merits and the benefits of Zionism and would follow it for his whole life. The great Israeli historian Ben-Zion Netanyahu, who in time would father Israel's longest-serving prime minister, would name his first son, Yonatan, in honor of his friend and the commander of the Zion Mule Corps, John or Yonatan Henry Patterson. And Yoni Netanyahu would, of course, go on to attain his own legendary status, falling in the heroic commando raid on Entebbe in 1976. The story of Zionism is not merely the story of the creation of the State of Israel. It is the story of a people's survival through a sheer will to endure and to remain. It is the story of leaders possessed with a rare vision and genius that turned a shapeless yearning to go home into a precise political program capable of being implemented within the norms and systems of the day. And it's a story colored as much by its villains as by its heroes. Death certificates on white papers, grand muftis and Nazi executioners played as much a part in the story of Zionism as did Herzl, Weizmann and Ben-Gurion. And it's a story that continues to be written with no end in sight, as Israelis debate, as Lincoln did for America at Gettysburg, what their national project truly means. And the enemies of Zionism steel themselves for a war they have yet to concede. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Romy's going to log on and do some Q&A now.
The second. Now, why would that be?
With audio, with video, without
Hi, can you hear me? Thank you, Alex. That was excellent as always. It's always a privilege to hear from you. We've got 10 minutes for Q&A. So if you raise your hand, Gabby can unmute you and Alex can answer your questions. Who has a question? I'm looking for faces. Just raise your hand or wave.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Sheila has a question.
Hi, I also have a question.
Okay. All right, Anne, you go ahead.
Thanks so much, Sheila. Thank you so much, Alex. You've mentioned Chaim Weizmann, and he certainly had a different type of chemistry with the top statesmen in Britain. I'm wondering about Stephen Wise, who headed the Zionist movement in America, and his significant failure to influence Roosevelt. And I wondered if you would comment on that as a contrast to the success achieved with occasional reversals by Chaim Weizmann.
It's interesting that you raised Rabbi Wise. I talk in the book about the kind of the parallel work done by the Zionist leaders on both sides of the Atlantic. So the work done by Weizmann, as you've referred to, and in contrast, the work done by people like Felix Frankfurter, Brandeis, and Rabbi Wise in the United States. Now, on the one hand, they were absolutely critical to achieving US support for the aims of Zionism, particularly when Woodrow Wilson was president. And they were key interlocutors to subsequent presidents as well, including Roosevelt. A lot has been written, and particularly recently from the archives that have been opened, about what Roosevelt's attitude to the Jews was into the state of Israel. And it was mixed. So in certain respects, he supported the aims of Zionism, the creation of a Jewish state, On the other hand, the claim was made that too little was done during the war period to save the Jews, and some very damaging quotes have come out from Roosevelt as well. I think we have to bear in mind that no history is clear or one-sided. There will be examples on both sides of the Atlantic of leaders, including people like Balfour, making comments of great tenderness and warmth towards the Jewish people and support for Zionism, and then more cynical, politicized comments which even have undertones of anti-Semitism. Whenever a leader has to take into consideration things like the creation of a state, there are so many conflicting scenarios and so many different lobby groups. So the Americans were being lobbied heavily by the oil industry, which favored closer relations with the Arab world and didn't care a jot for the creation of a Jewish state. There were also Christian anti-Semites that opposed the idea of the creation of a Jewish state and anything that would achieve Jewish equality. So it's difficult. And for people like Rabbi Wise, who were influential and had the ear of presidents, there will always be criticisms leveled at them that they never did enough. But I think that people like him and Frankfurt and Brandeis did actually a great deal to advance the cause of Zionism in the United States, but no record is unblemished. It's a very good question. I thank you for it.
Thank you, Alex. We have another question from Anne Crofts.
Oh, hello, Alex. I had a question that I'd actually sent to Ron Weiser, who I've known for years, and he suggested that I refer the question to you. The San Remo centenary was a few weeks ago, and I just wondered why there was nothing much in the Jewish community or the media about that. In fact, I actually found out about it through actually a Christian website. But apparently, I understand there were only 4 countries out of 70 to 90 nations that were approached who actually support.
Anne's gone on to mute.
Oh, sorry, missed that. So, I don't know what you missed. So, so apparently only 4 out of 70 to 90 nations that were approached supported the San Remo centenary. And, you know, ScoMo, Baruch Hashem, was one and wrote a wonderful letter in support. But countries like, I think, Britain, France and Germany and others who were at the original San Remo in 1920 adamantly refused to be part of it. And I just wondered why. And apparently there's going to be another meeting in November this year. Can we get more exposure and understanding what's going on with the San Remo?
Alex, we might get you, Alex, sorry, Anne, we might get you to just answer. That was a lot to unpack. So we'll just give Alex another second to do that, and then we'll move on. Thanks, Anne.
Sure, no, thank you, Anne, for the question. San Remo, as I mentioned in my remarks, was really a key moment in the history of Zionism and Jewish national rights. It was really a definitive recognition of the rights of the Jewish people to re-establish their homeland, which led to the mandate and which led to the establishment of the state. And you're quite right that it's an event that deserves to be commemorated. I'd been working with the Christian Zionist community in this country to have a series of commemorations, including an event in State Parliament, in New South Wales Parliament, where I was supposed to speak. But everything changed with the virus, obviously, and all those events got cancelled. We also made some approaches to media to see whether they'd been interested in covering stories around San Remo. I think the reality is that while it is absolutely essential that we as Zionists, as advocates, as activists, understand the importance of San Remo, understand the role that it played in the process and establishing the legitimacy of Israel, really in the public, it's of kind of marginal interest. It's too historic and too remote to really capture people's imaginations. I would like to see, as a starting point, our own youth and our own community truly understand the basis of the creation state of Israel, its legitimacy, and San Remo is central to that. But in terms of the wider public, there's really little appetite for that. But it's certainly a significant event, and I hope that once things return to some sort of normality, we can have these commemorations which will serve to educate activists and help them in their work.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Anne, for the question. We probably have time for one more question. I think Shani Gabai at the bottom there. Gabby, can you see them?
Yeah.
Can I talk? I was just wondering how supportive of a Jewish state was David Lloyd George, especially in light of his later support for Hitler. I watched an odd video about a visit that he paid to Hitler in 1936, I think, and he was full of admiration for Hitler, although that may have changed later. So I was just wondering how supportive he was of a Jewish state, and if he was, why was he in support of Hitler?
Yeah, look, officially, Lloyd George was very supportive of the creation of a Jewish state for a number of reasons. Firstly, Weizmann had been introduced to Lloyd George through the editor of the Guardian newspaper. And the Guardian newspaper, for those who follow the press at the moment, is virulently anti-Israel and hard left-wing. But back then, particularly through its editor, Scott, this was a very pro-Zionist and pro-Jewish newspaper. And Scott made the introduction of Lloyd George to Weizmann. They struck up a wonderful relationship, and Weizmann had that uncanny ability, that magnetism, and he was able to impress upon people like Lloyd George the legitimacy of Jewish national aspirations, the necessity of it, and so forth. And so Lloyd George was won over to the Zionist cause. And then after Weizmann's work in acetone, and after the end of World War I, in his war memoirs, Lloyd George talks about turning to Weizmann and saying, "You have rendered an incredible service to the Crown in the state's time of greatest need. What can we do for you?" And Weizmann responded, "I don't want anything for myself, but I want you to do something for my people." And that became the Balfour Declaration. Now, some have cast doubt on whether that conversation ever took place or quite in those terms, but I think it's kind of emblematic of the work of Weizmann, the impact he was able to have, and both through his utility, but also through his idealism, how he was able to get people like Lloyd George and Balfour to support Zionism. So Lloyd George was instrumental, and he did support it. How do we then reconcile it with subsequent statements, dubious alliances, and so forth? I think when you look at the story of Zionism generally, and I really follow this closely in the book, the trajectory of the Zionist movement, particularly through the United Kingdom, there was really a big shift from 1917, from that period, to the period on the eve of World War II. The world had changed significantly. The sort of idealism and romanticism that had guided British policymaking had evaporated completely. Chamberlain, on the eve of World War II, said that we have to reconsider the question of Palestine completely. And if we have to offend one side, let it be the Jews and not the Arabs. So he was thinking about World War II calculations, the fact that the Arabs could be useful allies, the Jews are numerically insignificant. So the world really changed. And the whole tone of government changed with it. And people like Lloyd George were easily able to move from being one thing to then another 20 years down the track.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you very much. Okay, unfortunately, that's all we have time for in question time, but Alex's book is available. In fact, it's on our website.
And you can also...
all you need to do is click on it if you're interested, or else contact Alex. I believe it's outstanding. We wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Be well and be safe.
It's a pleasure, and I hope everyone's well, and I wish you strength through these difficult times, and may we meet again very soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alex. Take care.
All the best. Take care. Thank you.
We now have Yigal. Yigal, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hello.
You're here. Okay. Yigal's just going to give us a quick update on Israel, and then we look forward to hearing from Zimra. Thank you, Yigal.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to say one comment that some person here asked about Lloyd George. When I heard Lloyd George, I'm born and raised in Jerusalem in a street called Lloyd George in Yerushalayim. in German colonies. I don't know if you've been there, but when I heard that, I had to say that. So, shalom everyone, boker tov. A very quick update about Israel. So I'm going to divide it to two. I'm going to speak 1 minute about just the corona virus, what is happening in Israel today, and of course our good news about the united government that's going to be, Baruch Hashem, finally after 3 elections in this Thursday in the Knesset. So we're going to start. I'm going to share a screen. You don't need to do anything. I'm just going to share a screen with you and show you something that I prepared here. And so now everyone is supposed to see what I'm saying. So this is in Hebrew, but I'm going to do it very, very fast. So in Israel, in total, there were 461,704 tests, okay, for the coronavirus. And in total, we have sick 16,492 sick people in Israel, okay? 11,548 doesn't have it anymore. That means that we have around 4,000 active sick coronavirus today in Israel. 254 people have unfortunately passed away, okay? So this is what we have, and we have 219 of those 6 people of the 4,000 who is still in hospital. 73 are in a bit harder situation, but the general point is that Israel is going slowly out from this pandemic. Now what I wanted to show you is very quickly, I want to show you something that I'm very proud of. Okay, let me do like this. Yes, this is bothering me. Again. Okay, so just a week ago, on Thursday actually, Scott Morrison, our Prime Minister here in Australia, shared a post, a beautiful post that he said that he wrote that he had a conference call with the 7 leaders countries in the world were actually dealing with this pandemic in the best way. And you can guess, you can see here who this guy is, I don't need to say. Our Israeli Prime Minister, Bibi Netanyahu, was one of the 7 countries that participate in this conference, and spoke about, shared ideas how they dealt successfully with the coronavirus. And being in one of this conference with Austria, with Denmark, with Singapore, with Greece, with Czech Republic, and Norway, and of course Australia, is a big honor for Israel. And the next picture I want to show you is this. This has been a big wave in Israel with how this is the Austrian Chancellor, who is a very young man that especially made a post on Facebook and all the other news of thanking Israel's Prime Minister and Israel country of saving Austria from this pandemic. Why? Because when this all started, this counselor called Bibi and asked him, give me an advice, how should I deal with this? And Bibi told him, shut down everything. But then the counselor said, wait, other countries, Germany and other countries doesn't do the same. He said, believe me, do it. And he did it, and he thanked him. And Austria is one of the countries in Europe that doesn't have, compared to the other countries with sick people, has one of the less countries in the world, and especially also in Europe with sick people in the coronavirus. So he made it clear that because of Bibi, because of the country of the state of Israel, the situation is very, very good. So to be proud also on that, I think we should all be. Now, what I want to do now is I want to stop. Okay, so I don't know how to do that. We don't have time, but I want to share with you very, very briefly what is happening now in Israel. So on Thursday, what we're going to have is we're going to have our government sworn to our new government united with Bibi Netanyahu as a prime minister, and for the first 1.5 years, and then Gantz will be the next prime minister. And it's I'm very, very happy as the majority of Israel, where, you know, really half-half as voted for both people. And I think that it's a huge achievement of leaving the blue and white partners, Lapid and Ya'alon, to understand that we need to have in this situation a united government. So I think that with this, I will finish and just say that there's always hope, although I wasn't so optimistic a few weeks ago, but it's always hope, and I'm hope from here, new government of Israel will go from strength to strength. So that's all. Toda.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Yigal. Take care, be well, be safe. Thank you for joining us, and thanks for all that interesting news. Now we have our second guest speaker, Zimra. Zimra, are you there?
Yeah, Sheila.
Where is, Zimra, right. Zimra Siegel. Zimra, hello, how are you?
I'm well, and you?
We can't hear you. Can you turn on your sound?
Can you not hear me at all? Okay, I need help.
We can hear you. It's just very soft.
Okay, we're going to try and do something. I've got tech support here.
We're losing people.
Is this better?
Yeah.
Better?
Yes.
No.
Some say yes, some say no.
It's soft. Better.
Okay, I'll go a bit nearer. Is this any better? No.
No.
It's okay, Zimra. You're okay. I think if you just speak up a little bit louder and closer, we can hear you enough.
It'll be okay.
Okay. Hi, Bernice.
Hi.
Okay, Zimra, can you say hello so we can hear you?
Hello, everyone.
Right. Zimra has been with Jewish Care for 18 years. Is that correct,
Yes.
Zimra?
Yes.
18 years. And she has master's degrees in counseling and dementia. And Zimra is an expert, of course, in these fields. So welcome. Hello, Zimra. It's over to you. Please speak loudly.
Okay,
Hi,
thank you
Zimra.
very much for inviting me. Sheila, there's one thing that I really don't agree, the word expert. We're living in very unprecedented times here. And I think the medical field, everybody's kind of flying in the seat of their pants, but getting there. So what is unprecedented? We've had plagues before, we've had epidemics before, we've had disasters before. But the world hasn't been so connected previously as we are now through the internet. And everybody has such a heightened awareness of what is going on around the world, which has both positives and it has negatives. At Jewish Care, we have had to literally transform our face-to-face work as creatively as possible, as quickly as possible to virtual work. So we have all been having a lot of connections with clients and with new people from the community who've expressed just about every dimension of, and I'm using the word in inverted commas, suffering, emotional, worry about health, financial uncertainty, the feelings of being confined, to be in isolation, specifically for Holocaust survivors, uncertainty, when is this going to end? And change itself is a stress for a lot of people. So while initially we were hearing a lot about anxiety, depression, panic, to the extent of the hoarding, and we know the anger that generated in the community. But more recently, we're hearing more about boredom, irritation, wanting to take control back over their life. And what we have also heard a lot of, which has been so inspiring, is the initiative and the resilience of so many members of our community. It has really buoyed us in our work to see how people have responded. And it's actually unexpected, because as a whole, I mean, there are exceptions, but people have managed to find their way through this. We have also seen the opposite, where we've realized, and I'll give you an example, Judaism isn't about a building, it's about people, and it's just amazing how we've all connected. So at this point, I wish you all a Chag Sameach, or as they say in Israel, a Lag Sameach, Lag BaOmer. And last night, there were 18,000 people across Australia and New Zealand joining on a Zoom session to celebrate Lag BaOmer, which is just amazing. Okay, so I'm going to just go through some of our thoughts of what we've heard and what we have come up with as solutions. I've read quite a lot, including Natan Sharansky, Rabbi Law, Jonathan Sachs, who are both very inspiring in this situation. And if anyone can read any of their work, it is really amazing, including videos. So one of the things we have to do is manage, all of us. We have to manage a whole lot of things in our lives. So one of the main things is, how do we manage our thoughts? There's a worldview we can look at, and so I'll give you two examples. The one is that we shouldn't really ask, why is this happening to me? We should really ask, what can I do in these circumstances? What is expected of me? How can I make the most of these times? We also should look at this time not as something to just live through, but something that we can change ourselves positively. And the other one that I've heard is, what is the opportunity now? You know, yes, it's distressing. Yes, there is so much going on and it's uncertain, but what is the opportunity? So I'm going to quote, actually I heard one of my colleagues speaking to one of our Holocaust survivors, and this to me just epitomizes resilience. So one of the Holocaust survivors stated, I have experienced suffering. I've experienced confinement. I've experienced separation. I've experienced a tenuous access to food. I know about suffering. This isn't suffering. This is more inconvenience. And how's that for a positive attitude? So what can we do to actually control our thoughts? Especially if we have heightened anxiety, our thoughts can just go all over the show and sink us into a depression. So I won't go into details, there's no time, but mindfulness is a very useful tool. A simple thing like gratitude is really amazing. So even today, we all here, if we didn't have the technology, and whoever created the technology, we wouldn't be able to connect on this level. We wouldn't be able to connect with family. Perspective. Is this life-threatening? Is this the end of the world that I am confined? Is it life-threatening that I'm only down to my last 10 toilet rolls? Or is it a problem that I can actually try and solve or find another way of dealing with it? For a lot of us, prayer is a very useful tool. Saying Tehillim is absolutely amazing. But there are other things like meditating, and music can just feed you. It distracts you from your thoughts, but also can feed and elevate you. So those are just some of the things that are really useful. And of course, externalizing your thoughts. So not keeping those thoughts inside yourselves to go around in a vicious circle. Find a good person to talk to. and the emphasis is on the word good, not somebody who will make things worse. And that way you can maybe gain some perspective. Control stresses. So Gabby, can you put on the first meme? I don't know if Gabby saw me. Okay, so I actually sent Gabby a meme to put up to share.
I'm trying, I'm getting there.
Are you getting there? Okay. I didn't know if you could hear me. Shall we skip it? I can work over it.
Yes, so I've got the second one up, but not the first one.
Okay, don't worry. So one of the stresses, and we all fall prey to it, I am an absolute culprit, but the overdose of news, the overdose of information, the over-discussing of, I'll use the Hebrew word, the matzav. It is really so stressing because we don't always focus on the positive things that are happening. We focus on the numbers. I don't know, there's a site that updates you every second on what's going on in the world, and highly, highly stressful. So switch off the news. Keep the news as a separate, that's it, the new Yiddish word. Ausgezoomd. Okay, so some people are really just, it's really too much going to all the sessions that are available. They need to just shut down things a little bit. On your mobile phones, people have settings to be alerted to different new occurrences in the news. Switch those off. Don't have this constant stream of news coming into you. The other thing is there are people who catastrophize. The other word that Israeli psychologist uses is awfulize. When you are with people who catastrophize everything, tell them, I'll give you 5 minutes to catastrophize, but please can we then start talking about chocolate, about eating, about anything else except what's going on. Don't constantly expose yourself to what's going on. And try, it's a technique, but try and see, okay, this is really bad, but is it really a catastrophe, or is there something positive in it? Okay, I mean, we can say, isn't it amazing? We have this overdose of news and everything, but isn't it amazing that we have this technology at this time? Can you imagine how much worse off we would be without all the technology? We wouldn't be having this Zoom session for once. We wouldn't have heard those wonderful things that Alex spoke about. Okay. The other thing about the technology, and this is also, for me, this is food for the neshama, to see what is going on, specifically in Israel, but I've seen in Italy also the music, how people have managed to think outside the box and gone around with cars, you know, with speakers, with music, how people have gone outside nursing homes to commemorate Yom HaShoah and just given those Holocaust survivors in the nursing homes comfort. How on Shabbat, communities have sung Kabbalat Shabbat beautifully together on their balconies. Without the technology, we wouldn't be there. But there's more. Not everybody is a Zoomer. Not everybody has all their technology. We can reach out to others. So connecting with other people is what's important. So emails, texts, and dare I say, letters. I mean, how wonderful to receive a letter. I'm going to give you a quick example of one of my colleagues who really thought outside the box here. So we have isolated clients, some of whom have cognitive deterioration, and she has found a really simple way to connect them while they're in isolation. just a simple way on the mobile phone, adding different callers to the call, and she runs groups that way, which I think is magnificent. And the results of that have been outstanding. Rabbi Sachs, who he keeps Shabbat, obviously, he puts on, I don't know if you know those photos, those electronic photo things. So he's loaded all his grandchildren's photos on it. So on Shabbat, even though he can't speak to them, he sees them on with this. It's not a reflection of weakness. It's not a reflection of lack of confidence. It's the actual opposite. If you're not managing with your emotions, if you're not managing with finances, ask for help. So I can only talk about Jewish care. We have people for you to speak to help you go through these awful times. We've got people, we've got funds to help people who've lost income through the COVID virus. There is a process, but it really has helped a number of people in our community. So if anybody knows people who are financially struggling, please encourage them to call. You can call me, but you can call our first call as well. Ask for help. Routine, there we go. Routine is another thing that's very important. So I've got really beautifully dressed up here, except I'm wearing my slippers because they're more comfortable. But here we've got this, I can't remember her name, but she needs to get out of bed because she's late for the couch. Keeping routine is really very important because we are going to get through this. And we will have to regain routines. And by keeping routine, you keep some control over your life. So we need to look after our bodies. We must make sure we're safe. We can't do a lot of exercise, but we can walk around in our house, in our gardens, go for a walk. If we are worried about how safe we are, access a physiotherapist through your GP as an example to make sure you're safe. To keep your mind safe, learn. There's so many online courses. There's so many shiurim. There's so many lectures. There's so many Zoom sessions. Access them, use them, and keep your mind healthy as well. And the other thing that I would really recommend is relax. Switch your mind off. Allow yourself to watch whatever it is on Netflix, YouTube, no matter what it is, just to switch off and read books. And the last thing is humor. I am sure somebody is going to make $1 million out of a book of all the memes that are going around in the cartoons. The cartoons and memes about dogs, how happy they are to have their owners at home, but they're overstressed by all the walks they have to go on. They're memes about parent role reversal. And laughing at yourself and at the people around you with them is a way of normalizing what you're going through. So I don't know if any of you have watched this particular video. I find it extremely funny, but it's done with respect. It's trying to be helpful. It is amusing. It's in Hebrew, but with English subtitles. So Gabby, can you play this? Then no sound.
It's very funny.
Because there's no sound. Okay, so I didn't hear anything from there. I don't know what happened to the sound. It really is worth watching using that mix of English and Hebrew. But what it is about is a son teaching his mother, who it's a real life situation, to do a lecture on Zoom. She is an educationalist in Israel, and it's just magnificent. He had some criticism over it because people thought it was disrespectful. So he did a subsequent one where he was an older person and his daughter was teaching him something in a very similar situation. So yes, there are issues in this particular situation we have where there's friction between generations, friction within the home, but talk and realize it's really very different situations. Try and talk it through, try and get help if it's needed, but try and see the humor in it as well. I've just really rushed through everything, but what the main message that I want to give is, yes, we are moving, hopefully, I really hope, towards the end of this isolation. I don't think the virus has gone, and we still need to be really careful, but really take care of yourself, both your mind, your spirit, your body. If you need help, ask for it. If you need to share with somebody, find people to share with, and reach out to others. That is the best thing for anyone. A lot of research has been done on altruism, helping other people. And I'll finish off with this. One of my clients right at the beginning was so stressed at being confined in her home. She was a real, if anybody's South African, a joler. She loved going out a lot. So I suggested to her, phone people. So she said, they're not phoning me. So I said, well, just phone. A few hours later, she phoned and she said it was wonderful. So she has been constantly phoning people and uplifting others, but in the meantime, really uplifting herself and me. So I wish you all safety. I wish you all a good path through this virus, you and your families, and again, Chag Sameach. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Zumra.
Okay. Thank you, Zumra. Thank you, Gabby, for all your organization. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We really look forward to getting together again very soon, face to face. And thank you to all our speakers. Take care, be well.
Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you, Mel.
Thank you, lovely to see you.
Thank you, everybody. Everybody give me a wave. Blow a kiss. Thank you, everybody. Take care. You'll hear from me soon. God bless.
Bye.
Bye-bye.